And it was that point that I pretty much, convinced myself that there is no way in hell that I'll ever become a doctor, no way that I will ever get into medicine ever again. And it's at that point that I pretty much gave up all hope. A few weeks later, I remember having a mini breakdown. I never thought that I would be where I am now, a final year medical student, close to becoming a doctor. What is going on, guys? My name is Kenji and welcome back to my channel. I hope it's not the first time that you're watching one of my videos, but just in case it is, I'm a final year medical student and a biomedical science graduate studying at King's College London. And guys, round about a year and a half ago, I made a video about my whole entire journey into medical school. But ever since then, I've gained around 40,000 subscribers. So a lot of you people probably haven't heard my story about how I got into medical school without the best grades. So in this video, I'm taking you guys through my entire painful history and process of getting into medical school, going from the guy who didn't even get the grades to apply to medical school to where I am now as a final year medical student. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So my love for medicine and my love for becoming a doctor actually started when I was quite young. I don't know if you guys have seen this show called Dexter's Laboratory.
Hey, who needs to study? With my genius, I can learn while I sleep.
It was one of my favorite shows I absolutely loved, and that really made me want to become a scientist and really made me fall in love with science and medicine. And having been born in Kenya in East Africa, my school and I would often volunteer in the local slums to actually go and help build the infrastructure. And when I actually moved to the UK and had the opportunity to come here, I realized that healthcare is a huge thing and is actually something that we're so lucky to have here in the UK. So it was that kind of point that I decided to pursue medicine, and when I really fell in love with the process. So when I was around 16, that's when I actually made the solid decision to pursue a career to actually become a doctor. Now, moving on from my 16-year-old self, I then went to college and I decided to do maths, biology, chemistry, and further maths at A level. However, although I was super passionate about actually getting into medical school, I unfortunately got a BB in my year 12 results. So the A was in maths, I had an A in biology, but I got a B in chemistry. And back then, during the time that I was in college, the way it worked is that your year 13 final A level results, which are your kind of end of high school results, are all based on how you performed in year 12, which is the second last year of college. Now, because of my results in the exam, I actually ended up getting predicted A star A B at the end of my A levels. And although those are really good grades, I actually didn't get predicted a high enough score to apply to medical school. And I really remember the day that I got those grades. I went to my teachers and I told them that I got A star A B, and they all told me unanimously, and as well as the careers advisor, that no one in the history of our school got into medical school with a B prediction in chemistry. And I honestly remember the day that I got that news, and I went back home, I went into bed, and I literally just cried and stayed in bed for such a long time, because it kind of felt like my dreams of becoming a doctor had been shattered in an instant just because of one result. I even tried to contact my chemistry teacher, and I was literally begging them, asking them to please give me the A prediction, give me a better prediction in chemistry. I promise you I will achieve that grade. And unfortunately, they were not able to change my grade, and I had to completely change career paths. Now, at that time, I was so upset, I was so sad, that when I actually came to apply to university, I really did not care what university I go to. I didn't care what degree I do. So I literally just chose a random degree, which ended up being biology. And I sent off my university applications to hopefully get into biology. And a couple of weeks later, I actually discovered that there was a degree called biomedical science, which seemed a lot more suited to me, given the fact that I was more interested in biomedical science than I am in biology. So I jumped onto my laptop really quickly and I emailed all of the universities and said, please, I made a mistake. Can you please transfer my degree from biology to biomedical science? And actually 4 out of 5 of them said yes. And that's why I eventually went to university to actually study. Now, as I started studying biomedical science at the University of Birmingham, I was still quite upset that I didn't get into medicine. Of course, that was my dream, to be a doctor. And at that point, I was really confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm doing this biomedical science degree and I don't even know, why I'm doing it. I didn't even know, what career paths I could possibly take. But I just said, you know what, let's just start and see how it goes. And a few weeks later, I honestly started to enjoy biomedical science. I met the most amazing friends. I loved the university and I was really enjoying the degree. As well as that, the people who I actually met were a lot of medics, a lot of medical students. I played football with a bunch of medical students. We were sat in the same lecture halls. So a lot of my friends and a lot of people I spent my time with ended up being medics as well. And that was kind of good and also bad. Bad because I was sat next to people in my lectures who were doing medicine. They got in, they achieved what I didn't. It kind of made me a bit, envious and a bit ashamed that I didn't actually manage to achieve the goal that I wanted to actually achieve. But the good thing was that as well as, the degree being taught in a medical school, biomedical science at the university was taught in an actual medical school, and having loads of friends who were medics, that kind of, subconsciously relit the spark inside of me to actually pursue medicine. And although at the time, that felt really good, I didn't want to put my hopes, too high, because I wasn't entirely sure if I was good enough. You know, I didn't know if I can actually achieve the grades necessary in biomedical science to then go on to apply to medicine. But what I did is I promised myself that I'm going to try super hard now to hopefully achieve the grades needed to then move on to apply to biomedical science. Now, as well as obviously enjoying university, I put a huge amount of effort, which meant that I left first year with a mark away from a first class. So I think I got 69%, and 70% is actually where a first class is. So I was very close to getting a first class, but I actually met the bar in first year to hopefully get the grade to apply to medical school. What's also really funny is that at the time, my family weren't entirely sure what I was doing. I think they were pretty much convinced I was doing medicine, even though I wasn't, and that kind of added a bit more pressure on me as well as that. But first year aside, we then moved on to my second year of biomedical science, and again, I came back after summer with so much passion to try do even better and actually achieve a first class in second year, because I knew that if I was to get into medical school, this will be a very important year, because my prediction, my overall kind of classification will be based on my performance in second year as well. So I worked super hard in my second year, and we got to the end of second year and I actually ended up getting a pretty good, you know, solid grade. I got, I think it was around 74-75% in my second year, which was a first class, and that actually meant that I could be predicted officially a first class for my final overall degree classification. After we finished off my second year of biomedical science, I spent my entire summer, I completely sacrificed my entire summer, both doing research in a lab in efforts to try and boost my CV. Throughout the whole entire year, I also volunteered in an elderly care home where I helped look after patients, again to try and, you know, boost my CV, and also did a bunch of work experience on the side throughout the entire second year summer, again to try and boost my CV in the hopes of applying to medical school. I also spent 3 weeks during that summer preparing for the dreaded UCAT, a medical school entry exam, and I actually ended up getting a pretty decent grade in my UCAT score, so that by the time we entered third year, I knew that there was actually a pretty good chance that I would hopefully be able to get into medical school. So the summer of second year kind of got out the way, and we finally started our final year, which is the third year of biomedical science. And at that point, I kind of said to myself that I'm gonna have to go all in. You know, I've sacrificed so much already so far in the last 2 years of biomedical science. It can't be all for nothing. I have to try my absolute hardest, sacrifice as much as I ever have to try and do as best as I can to get into medical school. And what that meant for me was really taking a huge chunk out of my socializing to try to put in all that time that I would have spent socializing into actually preparing for the medical school application. I literally told my friends that any sort of plan after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the night, I'm not there. I especially do not want to go clubbing whatsoever. I want to spend as much time as I possibly can, you know, getting into medical school, because that was my dream and that's what I knew I wanted to achieve. So things in final year started becoming really stressful. You know, I had all of the coursework coming up, I had loads of exams coming up, and I knew that in a couple of months I'll also be starting my dissertation. But October came around, and October is the month that I actually submitted my application and finally became a medical school applicant. And to be honest with you guys, of course I was a bit nervous, a bit scared. I was scared of rejection. You know, like, who wants to be rejected? Like, you know, it's not a nice feeling to be rejected, and I was really scared to put forth my application. But I told myself, you know, Kenji, you've come this far. If it's meant to be, it will be. So I went ahead and submitted my application, and I was also really proud of myself. You know, the last time that I got to this period in my A-levels in high school, I didn't even get the grades to apply to medical school. So already in my heart and in my mind, I knew that I had already won. You know, I got this far, I achieved the grades to be able to apply to medical school. So even being able to submit an application to medicine got me really excited, and I was super proud of myself for coming this far already. So we moved on from October, and we then arrived at the dreaded month of December. And December was, honestly, looking back at my life, I'm 25 years old right now, but December, honestly, to this day, I still remember it being the worst month of my entire life. I was super stressful, and it's probably the month that I probably came closest to being depressed. I had so much work on my shoulder. I knew that I already had a guaranteed interview for medicine. The reason being is because I was already studying biomed at the University of Birmingham. They actually had 10 places available for biomedical science students to get into medicine, and luckily enough, I actually achieved all of the application criteria, and they gave me a guaranteed interview for medicine in January. So I already had the weight of an interview for medicine on my shoulder. That was super stressful. You know, I had my dissertation that was due in a couple of months, and I would be starting my dissertation in just a couple of weeks. And as well as that, I had all of the coursework that normally comes with biomedical science. So December was a very low month for me, but I tried my hardest to keep up and to actually keep my head above the water, because I knew inside of me that I wanted to become a doctor, and that's what I kept working towards. So as I promised myself, I sacrificed my entire Christmas during December to really sit down and study as hard as I possibly can, and most importantly, to actually prepare for the guaranteed interview that I knew I had in Birmingham in January. So January finally came around, I got through December, and I was super happy to know that that's behind me. But what was also still super stressful was that I knew I had had my interview at Birmingham coming up. I eventually went to the interview and I finished it kind of feeling pretty okay. I didn't think it went too badly. And then I started the dreaded waiting game of waiting to hear back from Birmingham. And it was also at that point in time that I started getting rejections from the other medical schools that I applied to. As a whole, I applied to King's College London, which is where I am now. I applied to Manchester as well. I applied to Barts, and also finally to the University of Birmingham. So as I said, I had the interview for Birmingham, already gone, and I was waiting for a reply back from them. But in January, I actually got rejected without even an interview straight away from Barts and also from Manchester. So I knew that Birmingham was one of my only options that I had to get into medical school, and I still had my hopes up, and I was still banking on getting into King's and hopefully at least getting an interview from King's as well. Getting rejected from those two medical schools without even not being offered an interview was really, really hard. It hit me really hard in my heart because it brought back that feeling of being rejected, back when I was in high school, and it was a really tough time to get over. But you know what? I got through it. I got over it, and I remember working as hard as I possibly can in the labs, working on my dissertation. And one day I was actually in the common room of my labs, eating my lunch with some of my friends, working on my dissertation, and one of my colleagues who was on my course, who also had a guaranteed interview, was sat opposite me. And I remember him kind of standing up from his chair, looking at his email and celebrating, being like, oh my god, I got an offer from Birmingham, the guaranteed interview came through. And that immediately made me, so scared, and had a huge amount of adrenaline going through my blood, because it meant that they finally released the the offers for medicine at Birmingham. So straight away, obviously what I did is I brought out my phone, I went on my emails, and I was hopefully expecting to have an offer from the University of Birmingham. But to my surprise, I actually had an email from the University of Birmingham rejecting me from the medicine course. And that again was super hard. It was not only hard because I was rejected, but it was also really hard because I was surrounded by my friends who were waiting to hear the good news, and I couldn't give them that good news. But although it was a rejection, Birmingham actually put me as number 2 on the waiting list. They said that they gave the top 48 candidates offers, and I actually placed 50th. So I literally missed the offer by 2 places. And I thought that because I'm second on the waiting list, there's probably a very good chance of actually getting the offer, because if 2 people change their mind and decide to go to a different medical school instead of Birmingham, then I will be up next to get the place. And that kind of kept my hopes up for a little while. Now we got through January, and February finally came, which also was my birthday month, but by no means was I celebrating too much. I remember being sat in my room pretty much every day in February, working so hard on my dissertation. And it was one of those days where I was sat in my room like I am now, literally sat working on my dissertation, that I got the email from Birmingham. Super excited, because I thought, you know what, they probably are giving me an offer. 2 people must have dropped out or changed their minds or gone to a different university. This is really likely to be an offer. So straight away, again, I put up my phone, I brought up my phone, read the email, and unfortunately, it was a rejection from Birmingham, saying that yeah, unfortunately no one took up a different offer, and that I have been at this stage completely rejected, and if I want to get into Birmingham, I have to apply the following year. Now I remember being sat there, on my desk in my room alone, and I probably expected myself to cry. Like I thought, Kenji, this is so sad. Your dream is, almost over. It's pretty much over. Why aren't you crying? And I remember just being sat there and having no tears in my eyes and just being completely shocked and not being able to think properly, because my highest chance of getting to medicine had just been stolen from me. And I remember one of my best friends coming in the room and telling him the news, and I just felt kind of it was almost freeing in a way, because I had been so stressed up until that point, so nervous, waiting to hear back, and just getting rejected kind of felt in a way also just relieving that I wouldn't have to wait any further. And it was that point that I pretty much convinced myself that there is no way in hell that I'll ever become a doctor, no way that I will ever get into medicine ever again. And it's at that point that I pretty much gave up all hope. A few weeks later, I remember having a mini breakdown when I went home to visit my mum. I remember literally designing a whole entire backup idea to move back to Kenya and start a business. I think I wanted to open up a gym. I made the entire logo of the gym, and I had this whole entire crazy idea to go back to Kenya and give up medicine and make a whole entire business. But looking back now, I honestly realized that was my coping mechanism. That was the only way that I knew how to cope with all this rejection, which was to make up another plan that seemed amazing for me. But looking back now, making a gym in Kenya was definitely not what I wanted to do. It was not my passion whatsoever, but it was just a way that Kenji at the time knew how to cope. At that point, after being rejected from all 3 universities, I had one option left, which was King's. So this is now in March time, and because it was so late in the year, March is super late to be invited for an interview. I spoke to my teachers in the university, and they all said, if you haven't heard back by now from King's, it's March time, you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be a no, it's going to be a rejection. And that's how I took it in my mind. I never thought that I would be where I am now, a final year medical student, close to becoming a doctor, through going through medical school at King's College London. I remember the day actually, as I said, said, I went home to visit my mum and I was having dinner, and then on my smartwatch, I got an email notification saying that King's have emailed you. And there I was. I said to myself, you know, finally King's have rejected me. We can now move on with the rest of my life, and I'll do something else, or I'll apply next year. I don't really know what it is. But immediately, obviously, I grabbed my phone again, checked my emails, and to my surprise, I was invited for an interview at King's College London, which I really did not expect. You know, it's so late in the year, and not only the fact that it's so late in the year, the fact that I'm getting invited for interview from such a prestigious university. I think King's is the highest ranked out of all of the places I applied to. I just honestly could not believe it. I couldn't even finish my dinner. I was so excited, and I had to tell, you know, my mom, but I actually kept it to my mom. I didn't tell anyone else because I was so nervous that I would be rejected. Now, the really difficult thing is that my dissertation at the time was due in 3 days' time. You know, I had to go back to Birmingham. I had to work on my dissertation and submit it because I needed a degree. And then 2 days after the submission of my dissertation, I was actually due to have the interview at King's. So I essentially only had 2 days to prepare for that interview, but I went back to Birmingham. I worked as hard as I possibly can. I submitted my dissertation with 1 minute to spare, finally got that out of the way. And then I sat down on the books and I said to myself, you know, Kenji, this is your last shot. This is your last opportunity. You have an interview in 2 days' time, in 48 hours time. You need to be really, really well prepared. And I worked as hard as I possibly could for that 48-hour period. And then I went to London, I went for the interview, and I tried my hardest and I gave it my best. And I remember walking out of the interview, you know, feeling that it went really, really well. But again, I didn't want to put my hopes up too high. I thought that Birmingham went well as well, but apparently it didn't. So I didn't want to, you know, kind of hype myself too much. And I just waited patiently for a response from King's. And 2 days after my interview had passed, my life literally changed in the space of 48 hours. I went from thinking I will never ever get into medical school to finally getting an offer from King's College London. And I still remember that day, like, you know, up until now, it's etched into my mind so well. And I was actually home again in London, and I was revising for my final exams, which I had in a couple of weeks. I was so tired, and I took a 5-minute kind of break to lie down on my bed. And I was lying down on my bed and I was scrolling through my phone, and again I got the notification saying King's have replied to you. And I've never been so anxious and so worried in my life. I straight away jumped on my phone, and there it was. I had an offer that said we'd be more than happy to take you onto our 5-year course starting in September. Well done, congratulations. And I remember just like not being able to control myself, just being so happy, crying you know, so heavily. And straight away I ran to the kitchen, I ran to my mum, and I didn't even tell her the results. I just gave her the phone and said, Mum, there's something I want you to read, please read it. And she equally was so happy for me. You know, she was so yeah, just really happy that I finally you know, made it this far. And I remember sending it to the group chat to my entire family. And then that evening I was I went to the gym, as I always do. Then I walked home, and on the walk home I just remember like crying as hard as I possibly can that I finally made it this far. At that point I honestly didn't even care if I, you know, made the offer. I didn't even care that there was still a small chance that I may not make it. I was just so proud of myself to have made it that far, to finally get an offer for medicine. And I remember my family and my uncle, for example, calling me and just congratulating me, and that just felt so amazing. But I couldn't forget that the offer was conditional meaning that I will only get a full unconditional offer if I achieve a 2-1 in my exams. So I knew at this point, of course, I had to celebrate a little bit, but I had to put that to the side and now focus on getting a 2-1 so that I can actually be accepted at medical school. So I went back to Birmingham, I went back to university, and I worked as hard as I possibly could. I remember being so stressed out that on the day of my exam I actually vomited, and I actually remember like being so unwell that my friend even called 999, called an ambulance the night before our first exam because I was that much stressed. You know, I was just crazy stressed. But I finally sat my exams, I got them out of the way, and at that point I said that it's honestly in God's hands. There's nothing I can do right now that will increase my chances. So I kind of put it to the side. I went on holiday with my friends, we went to Ibiza, we celebrated that we finally finished our degree, and it was actually the morning after that we got back from Ibiza that I checked my email, and King's emailed me saying that my conditional offer has now been met and I've been offered a place in September to start medical school. And like that was probably the most like memorable time in my life. I just got back from a holiday with my friends, I've just achieved the first class of my degree, and now I can finally say that I'm guaranteed 100% going to medical school in September, and that was honestly the happiest day of my life so far. And that's pretty much the story of how I got to where I am, guys, and you guys now know more about me, but I don't want to stop there. I actually want to share a few kind of thoughts on the matter about how I got into medical school. And the first one being that if you're watching this right now and you've been rejected by whatever it is you want to get into, it's honestly not the end of the world. There are many ways of getting into medicine. You know, one unorthodox kind of atypical way is the same way that I did, you know, through doing biomedical science first and then trying to apply again again. I've met so many people, you know, across my last 5 years of medical school who've gone in through different ways. Some of my friends graduated from the biomed degree, did a master's, did a PhD, and then came into medicine. I have friends who did medicine in Eastern Europe, went to study medicine there, then came back to the UK to be a doctor. There are literally so many ways to get into medical school, so don't give up on your dreams. Try again, try the next year, try 3, 4, 5 times, and you finally will get there in the end if you work hard enough. And that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make, and I still believe it to this day, is that you don't honestly have to be a genius to get into medical school. I honestly thought at the time that to get into medical school you have to be super smart, and this is honestly a common misconception and everyone believes it, and I honestly believe it myself. To get into medical school you do not have to be the smartest person ever. You honestly don't. But what you may have to be is the hardest worker. You may have to work harder than everyone else, you may have to sacrifice more than everyone else, but you absolutely do not have to be the smartest person. I definitely don't consider myself, you know, particularly talented in school. As I said, I didn't even make the actual criteria to get into medical school the first time. I had to go through 3 extra years of biomedical science. I don't think I'm actually the smartest in the year by any means, but I still am doing really well, and I still do trust that in a couple of months time I will be a good doctor. So just because you're not doing well in your school, just because you didn't do well in the actual entry exam, that does not mean you will not be a good doctor. Your academic performance and the doctor you end up being are completely unrelated. Being a good doctor is more than being about good on your books. It's actually more importantly about who you are as a person and your personality. So don't worry about being the smartest person in the whole entire room. Focus on being the hardest worker. The next key thing that I want to say is that on a degree there are literally no dates. As you can see back here, I have my biomedical, oh not there, just there. I have my biomedical science degree up on my wall, and on that degree it does not say that it took me 3 years. So if it took you 5 years to become a doctor and it took me 8 years to become a doctor, it doesn't show up anywhere. It does not show up anywhere. And when you become a doctor, your patients will not ask you, by the way, you know, how old were you when you got into medical school? By the way, how old were you when you graduated to become a doctor? Your patients and your seniors and your colleagues literally do not care how you got into medical school. What they care about is that you're a good, a safe doctor, and you're a loving and kind and caring doctor. That's the key point. It might take you longer to get into medical school, but it literally does not matter. So forget about time and focus on getting in. The next key point that I want to make is that when you actually decide to become a doctor, don't compare your story to anyone else's. You know, everyone has a different story, and more importantly, everyone is on a different chapter. And as well as that, everyone is also on different levels. So for example, you may be like me. You may be starting from level 0 where you have no one in your family who are doctors. You may have a family who don't come from a background of education. You may come from a single parent home. You may not have the most amount of money to spend on like education and tutoring and all these things. And as well as that, you may be competing against someone who's not on level 0 like you. They might be on like level 10, level 20, and getting into medical school was only an extra 10 levels for them. They may have had more resources than you. They may have had a father and a mother who were a doctor. They may have had loads of money to actually get tutoring to better their grades. They may be on a completely different level to you, and I'm not saying that they don't have to put in the work and the graft to get into medical school, but it may well have been a lot easier for them to get from level 20 to level 30 to get into medical school, whereas you have to go from level 0 up until level 30 to get there. So these are different bars. Everyone is on different levels. So please try your best and not compare yourself to anyone. The next thing I wish I told myself way back then when I was struggling to get into medical school and when I was so stressed is I would tell myself that getting into medical school will not make you happy. Wherever you are in life, whether you're struggling to get into medical school or not, achieving the goal of getting into medical school definitely will not make you happy. And I honestly thought to myself that as soon as I get into medical school, I'll be the happiest person in the entire world. And that's really not true. Wherever you are today, whether you're in high school or you're doing biomedical science or whatever you're doing, you can make the choice today to be happy. And the person that I was back then when I was actually trying to get into medical school could also be happy. You know, I could still have been chasing this goal to get into medical school, but I also could have been more present in the moment and also enjoy the process as much as I did enjoying achieving the final goal. Because when you finally get into medical school, you will really be excited about getting there, but eventually that excitement will go away and you will then start on another journey to achieve even greater. So the chase to get your goals, the chase to get to where you are never actually ends. So wherever you are in the world right now, please choose to be happy. And the final point that I want to make to you guys is that I promise you, if you work hard, if you sacrifice your summers like I did, if you sacrifice a lot of socializing and whatever it might be that you have to sacrifice, it is all worth it in the end. You know, where I am now as a final year medical student, I could not be happier in my life about becoming a doctor in a couple of months. I'm super excited. It has been a long 5 years, that I can fully accept. It definitely has been a long journey, but it has been a journey that has been completely worth it. And I promise you that if you actually put in the grind wherever you are in the world today, it will all be worth it for you as well. Now that's pretty much the entire kind of lecture that I have to give to you guys. If you've actually enjoyed it, if it's added any value in your life, then please make sure to drop a like down below. It really helps me. Please share this video to more people who might be struggling. Make sure you're subscribed as as well with notifications on so you never miss another upload. Before you leave, also, here are a bunch of videos that I've made that you might also find useful and might also want to watch. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.